Hey guys, it's Dr. Tanner coming at you here. I'm coming at you from our IV suite. I just wanted to remind you, we've got this great speaker coming up. You're going to love it. Super exciting, really cool info, all like hands-on things you could implement into your life today. But I wanted to remind you at the end of the summit that you could link in, and I want you to have access to those bonus materials that these people are providing. It's really valuable information. So don't forget to link into that. I also want to let you know that I am here to help. I am happy to work with you, to help you with your health concerns, to help you with your performance. You can find me and have access to me, Dr. Tanner, at www.run-lab.ca. So that's run-lab.ca. You can link in there. You can find out how to work with me. Enjoy the summit. It's going to be a lot of fun. Hello, everybody. We are here with Tyrone Edge. Tyrone Edge is coming to us live. He is the founder of the World Speed Summit. Not only that, but he is an IAA level 5 coach, and he is a physical education teacher. We are lucky to have him as one of our speakers today. So Tyrone, as you know, we're talking about energy today and burnout. What's your take on that?
Burnout is a huge issue in the distance running community, in the endurance community. I do want to tell people that I don't coach a lot of distance athletes one-on-one, or
Yes.
but I do a lot of consulting with distance athletes, like endurance athletes from the 800 meters up to higher distances. Generally, I coach athletes that run between the 100 meters and the 400 meters, so the speed events. And I guess one of the things is that I would say is that with sprinters, because you have to be really careful with the dosages of the work that you do, because
Yes.
you're moving at such a high velocity, you can't do too much, or you're very quickly going to completely trash the athlete.
Yes.
And it becomes really, really obvious really quickly when you do that. So in the sprint events and in the, like the kind of the 400 meters is kind of an odd event. It's a speed event. It's very speed based, but there are some endurance qualities that you have to develop. So, you're constantly on the edge of doing too much with athletes, and you're always much better off doing less than you are doing more. Very well-known coach, Charlie Francis, one of his more famous quotes is less is more and more is less. And that's a very difficult concept for athletes to understand, and coaches as well, because it always is easier to do more. And I think the biggest thing that I would say, one of the biggest differences between the speed athlete and the endurance athlete is the endurance athlete is brought up in a culture of having to do a lot of work in order to get results, right? Whereas sprinters are completely the opposite. What you'll find with sprinters is that you'll find a lot of attention deficit disorder. You'll find their personalities they're not the most loyal individuals. They can be very difficult to work with, your very highest level athletes. And you constantly have to be able to stimulate them without overworking them, because they're what people would call lazy, but they're not lazy. What they're really, really good at is they're really, really good at understanding their central nervous system, and when enough is enough, and that's when they stop. They know when to stop. They know when they've done enough, and they don't do too much. If anyone's ever watched the Usain Bolt documentary that was hosted by former Olympic gold medalist Michael Johnson, you'll notice that Usain kind of turns up for practice late. He's not the most diligent of athletes in terms of doing the most work, but the one thing that he can do that no one else can do is do it at an extremely high velocity, extremely high quality work. It's a quality over quantity type of thinking that goes into speed training. And that's something that I'm going to bring, that kind of thinking here today. I know that your audience is mostly distance runners, but I really, really, really think it's critical for distance runners to start thinking about the quality of the work they're doing, not just the quantity. Because quantity is something that anyone can do, but is it really helping you? That's the question.
Yeah, I think that's a great point, because especially with distance, you do a 5, then you do a 10, and you're like, you know what, I'm going to do a half, I'm going to do full, and then before you know it, you're getting into the ultras. So you're always pushing the distances, and then trying to push the speed on top of that. So, like, how do you know when enough is enough? Like, how do you know when you're reaching that limit? Like, how can distance runners start to think a little bit more like a sprinter so they can keep themselves in the game?
Okay, so this is a really interesting question and a really interesting point that you bring up, and I do want to question the logic of continually trying to run longer and longer and longer distances. What is the point? Like, I don't understand what the point is of running a marathon if it takes you 5 or 6 hours. Is that really the right event for you? Like, it's not healthy. There's nothing healthy about being out there running for 5 or 6 hours. Um, yes, it's an impressive achievement to do mind over matter, I guess, and finish. I understand the appeal of that, but I do think that you really should think about like this as a general health developing activity that you're doing. So one of the things that I think that distance runners should consider is like when you're starting out, and I started out as a distance runner, and I moved to sprinting because it wasn't for me for a variety of reasons. But I started out running 5Ks, and I was, I was skinny fat at the time. I was 30 years old. I was, smoking. It just wasn't fit, right? I started doing some training, 5K training, pretty general stuff, nothing very fancy. But there's this kind of mentality that keeps pushing you up and up and up in distances. I never had any interest in running anything further than a 10K. And I think my best 10K, at the time was about 46 minutes, which was, for me, it was pretty okay. Right. But, 46-minute 10K and a like 24-minute or whatever I had in the 5K, those aren't very fast times. They're okay. Right. But if I had run a marathon, I'd probably been out there for 4 hours and 30 to 4 hours and 45 minutes.
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of interest in running for 5 hours. Maybe some people do.
Yeah.
What I would question is this idea. What I would think about for an endurance athlete, one of the things I would consider, just if you're having burnout issues or if you're running into issues with injuries, the best marathon runners a lot of the time are athletes who've retired from the 5,000 meters and the 10,000 meters on the track, and in their first marathon, go out and run a world-class time.
Mm.
Right? So some of the best marathon runners in history have come from the track. What I would suggest is that people think about, okay, how can I increase my efficiency in these lower distances, the 5,000 meters and the 10,000 meters? How can I get faster? And then if you want to move up to the marathon, maybe set some goals for yourself time-wise so that when you move up, you're spending less time out there running, so that, when you actually do this, run the marathon, you're not out there forever. You're out there for and you're trying to hit a pretty decent time goal. Now, yes, is that a different philosophy than most people's? Yes, it is. But I'm asking you to, I really want people to ask themselves why they're running a marathon, and is it appropriate at this particular time? Because I don't think it always is.
Yes.
If you look at the elite marathon runners today, you're looking at people who are, 5'8", 135 to 140 pounds for men. For women, they're generally small, very light. I'm a 6'3", 195 pound guy. It's completely different. It's completely different. I'm 40% heavier. The cooling that's going to happen in a taller body, like you have to be in the right race at the right time in order for you to run well. Okay. There's a lot of factors. We don't need to get too deep into that, but think about, whether you need to go really, really far, like to the marathon right away. Can you get faster at the 5K? Can you improve your running technique and become more efficient at that? Can you improve the quality of your ground contact? Can you improve your speed? So that all these things, when you go out there to run a 5K or a 10K, everything becomes easier and you're running faster times before you move up to any higher distances.
Yes.
And I think that just that thought alone and like really reconsidering, like, how can I increase the quality of my training? And not necessarily the volume, right? Like, but the quality of my training.
Yes.
And how can I get faster? That's going to help you and reduce potentially your chances of like the kind of repetitive strain injuries that you get when you're running really long distances, if that makes
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah, I think that repetitive strain, that's a great point there, because I find the more stressed out people are, the easier it is for them to get burnt out. And those are the people that are going to get hurt. And those are the people that can't heal from the injuries. So what are some of those repetitive strain ones? What might be an example of one of those injuries you might see?
Okay, so obviously the most common injury that we see with distance runners that I see is shin splints.
Yes.
It's a really, really big issue. Now, especially if you live in a northern climate where
Hmm.
you're forced to run indoors part of the year on tracks, and maybe potentially running on tracks that are really short, like 200-meter tracks, and you're constantly turning left, 2 or 3 months at a time.
Going the same
Sometimes,
direction. Yeah.
yeah, going in the same direction indoors. Like, that's a huge issue. The other issue that you have to think about there is the surfaces that you're running on. Um, like, if you're having injury issues, are you running on grass ever, or are you constantly running on sidewalks and asphalt? Because
Okay.
I constantly see people, when they're able to get outdoors, I constantly see it in my neighborhood here in Montreal, people running on the sidewalk. That's the hardest surface you could choose to run on. And it's like a lot of people are striking with their heel, right? Sending shock straight up into their knee and doing it thousands upon thousands upon thousands of times in every running session they do.
Yeah, and I think that would be a problem with the endurance people, because a lot of them, it's the sidewalk that they're pounding the pavement on those routes there. So would you suggest to them to vary up their surfaces, go sidewalk, go maybe on the asphalt if it's safe, doing a little grass work, doing a little hills, something like that?
I would, honestly, I would say do not ever run on a sidewalk for any reason. There's no excuse to run on a sidewalk.
Okay.
It's really, really a super hard surface for the kind of repetitive running that most people are doing and the distances that they're doing. It's inappropriate, and I would just avoid it at all costs if possible. Um,
Okay, so it's more the,
asphalt, asphalt's better slightly
okay.
than concrete. So if worst case scenario, if all you can do is run beside the sidewalk, obviously, please do it in a safe place, in a safe area.
Yes.
Then the next thing you could consider is finding like an ash track, which compresses better. The thing that people are really worried about in their training is that, oh, I'm not hitting my target times for my mile or my half mile or my 3 mile. So
Okay.
they want to run in a harder surface in order to achieve those target times. You're much better off running on grass
Okay.
and just setting an offset time. Like, you're not going to be able to run as fast. It doesn't matter. What you are doing is you're saving your joints, because there's a lot of repetitive pounding that's going on when you're running, and when you do it on grass or on a softer dirt surface where possible, you're allowing your body to distribute the shock better than it can if you're running on sidewalks or asphalt. It's just not it's not something something's got to give if you keep running on hard surfaces like that and are doing it 3, 4, 5, 6 days a week.
Okay, so just to help people understand, so the problem with the sidewalk versus the turf or something else is that the material is actually harder, and then when you have that impact of your foot, it's going to ricochet all the way up your body a little more than some of those other surfaces that might have a little bit of give. Is that kind of the principle of it?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay.
Basically, your body has to absorb the shock, because the concrete is not absorbing anything, right? It's
Mm-hmm.
just transmitting it directly back up into your skeleton and your tissue.
Okay.
So the asphalt gives slightly more, but nothing the way grass or dirt or an ash track does. Like,
Yes.
you really have to consider surfaces when you're running distance. Can't always be on a hard surface. A
Okay.
rubberized track, if you have the right shoes and you have good technique, is something you can do at
Okay.
times, but you can't do every session on that.
Great. That's a great tip. I think I'm not sure a lot of and a lot of runners even know about that, because I see most of them on the sidewalk there. But you kind of introduced that with, we live in a northern climate. Does living in North America or Canada have anything to do with our energy levels?
Yeah, I think that's a really important thing. And of course, it depends on a lot of things. But one of the things that I would really, and this is connected with shin splints as well, is vitamin D, is that most people are that live in northern climates are deficient in vitamin D. And this is something that's very important. Now, I want to preface this by saying I am not a medical professional. I'm just a coach, but I've seen this enough times to know that medical professionals don't always know what you need. They don't always know the training demands that you're doing. And not only that, they're not like your general practitioner is not a sports doctor. It's not really their forte to be like advising you on supplementation for training, right? So you have to understand, their role. So there's a huge range. If you get your blood work done, and let's say in Canada, it's going to cost you $30 to ask for your vitamin D to be tested, right? The best $30 you will ever spend.
I think it's more than that.
Well, when I get a physical, I just tell my doctor, can you add vitamin D? And they'll do it. Yeah. And it's like $30 if they don't offer to. If they don't offer and just ask them and get them to add it into the test, it's totally worth it.
Absolutely.
So the key thing though that you have to know about vitamin D is that you're going to get back this huge range of what's considered normal. Okay, you're not normal if you're an endurance athlete. You're somebody who needs to have much higher than the baseline level vitamin D in order to function properly as an athlete. There's a huge connection, and it's been studied. There's a huge connection between vitamin D and shin splints, like low vitamin D and shin splints. This is something that I see a lot in teenage female athletes. And the connection there is pretty huge. And again, like living in a northern climate, you're going to notice that, more people are obviously going to be deficient in vitamin D. Now, it also depends on your background and like, every individual absorbs vitamin D differently. Some absorb it less well than others. So what I tend to see is in certain athlete populations, by April, I've got kids, and because I teach elementary school phys ed as well, in April, at the end of, the indoor season of like soccer, of, a variety of different sports, of hockey, different things like that, is that April comes around, everyone's back outside, kids are coming in with, I broke my ankle, I broke my wrist, I strained this, I sprained that. What's the connection there? It's very interesting, but in, that month is the month where you're probably lowest in vitamin D.
Great point. That's right. We've had the winter months, probably October to March, where we've been inside a little bit longer. The sun hasn't been up as longer. It's dark and cold. We're not getting that exposure. We've depleted those stores. And then come April, that's when people start breaking things. Great connection there.
I have one young female athlete who every year, like clockwork for 5 years, would come in April, and I'd be like, listen, I'd talk to the parents and be like, you have to supplement vitamin D, blah, blah, blah. And, every April, like clockwork, she'd have a sprained wrist, some kind of ankle thing, an air cast, always the same thing, always the same month. Like, really? Wow. Is that a coincidence? I doubt it, right? So coaches, like, one of the things coaches need to do is, you can't always be a scientist, because scientists are historians. They're really, validating things that have occurred in the past. And like, maybe that's a controversial statement, but you have to sometimes go with your common sense and your intuition in trying to prevent things from happening. You'll never hurt yourself by supplementing vitamin D levels within a safe range, right? You don't want to be in the normal range. You want to be in the optimal range.
Yes.
Your health professional to get you in that optimal range and try to stay there as an athlete.
Yes. Yeah, I think that's a great point. And that goes with a lot of labs that I do. I always want to see people's lab work, because they might say, oh, I had this stuff tested and, my doctor said it was completely fine. And then I'll take a look at it, and you have your normal ranges, which are quite broad because they're suiting the entire population from youth to elderly. And then I have more of an optimal window where I like people to fall in for almost every marker. And a lot of the times we're missing that optimal window. And when we can get people into that area, their energy starts to improve. That's a huge one that they start to notice, and kind of all those other aspects of their life, depending on which marker is coming off, whether it's an inflammatory marker or whether it's a hormone marker, once those things start to fall in place, then their symptoms start to subside and they really start to feel like themselves again. That's a great point. So have your blood tested, but also have it reviewed by somebody else to see where you can fall into those optimal windows and how you can get yourself into those windows.
Yeah, I think it's important. My general practitioner, my GP, is pretty good, and I generally get my blood work done twice a year. I mean, if you're a serious athlete, I would recommend getting your blood work done 4 times a year if possible, just to see where you're at and see, so you can track the changes that you're making if you're taking this really seriously.
Mm-hmm.
2 times a year is excellent. 1 time a year is like, of course, you have to do it once a year. Like,
yeah, the minimum. Yeah.
Okay, one of the other things I want to talk about, since we're talking a little bit about some physiological things like vitamin D levels, is
Yes.
ferritin levels. Okay, this is really important. I think for every endurance athlete, your blood iron levels are a critical kind of marker of your ability to use oxygen efficiently, which is like basically the entire basis of most endurance training programs.
Yes.
Some people are always going to have low ferritin levels, and those people generally, or I don't want to say generally, but there's a certain population of people who are going to have low ferritin levels because they have a low potential for aerobic, like they have low aerobic potential, right? They don't have the potential to be like a really robust aerobic athlete.
Mm-hmm.
Those people generally have a high amount of fast twitch muscle fiber. And if you want to like learn a little bit more about this, David Epstein's book, The Sports Gene, is really, really good. There's an adaptation that's occurred in certain populations throughout the world that prevents malaria from affecting you, and basically it causes you to be not a very good aerobic athlete, but you have great speed and great power potential. So, for example, I could tell you, my wife, we got her DNA tested because I was convinced that she was like a natural speed power athlete. So my wife is ethnically comes from China, and there's a population in China, a strong population, especially in Guangzhou province, that has about 15% of the population has alpha thalassemia trait, which gives you a very low potential for aerobic things like endurance running, right? So you're not going to be a very good endurance runner. You're not going to be great. However, you are going to be an awesome sprinter. You're going to be an awesome weightlifter. You're going to be able to generate force very efficiently, except you're going to have no endurance whatsoever. So where do the best sprinters in China come from, do you think? Guangzhou province. So there you go. Like if you have low ferritin, it doesn't mean you have a lot of fast twitch muscle fiber, but it's an indicator in a lot of cases that you may have a lot of fast twitch muscle fiber, and that you may be more suited to speed power events. So one of the things I would ask you is, like, of course you can supplement ferritin, and if you're training a ton, your ferritin's going to drop. But one of the things I think people don't ask themselves in the endurance community is, am I in the right event? Am I, like, just think about your life. Like, were you always the fastest kid? Were you somebody who tired quickly after a like really maximal effort? Like you could run really fast for 30 meters and then that was it. If that's you, you may be more suited to running speed events or doing some kind of power activity like shot put or the 100 meters, or it could be a variety of different things. But you don't, like, maybe endurance running isn't your thing. It's a possibility, right, that you need to investigate. Like, not everybody's built the same. And we have to understand that people have evolved differently and have different strengths and weaknesses. And there's nothing, like, I wish I had, the speed power potential that my wife has, but I don't. But, I chose to do that stuff anyways because I enjoy it, right? And, like, I'm not saying that everybody should be trying to make the Olympics in an event, right? But you do want to put yourself in the right event to give yourself the most success possible. And you want to be working with your physiology, not trying to fight against it. You're not going to change your physiology from endurance to fast twitch. Like, you're not going to be able to change it completely. Can you influence it, and can you change it partially? Definitely with the right training, I believe.
Yeah.
That may be a controversial statement to some, but I don't think it is. However, you know, you want to be working with your body, not against it. I think that's the bottom line there. And, you know, just
Yeah.
keep those things in mind when you're choosing an event.
Yeah, I think that's a great point too. Like if you find that you're struggling to get through, like you've signed yourself up for this event, you really want to do it, but you're just feeling horrible after, you're struggling, you're tired, you're injured, you're you know, you just don't, you're losing that motivation to do it, then that's a good thing to step back and do a reassessment. You know, am I in the right distance? Am I in the right event? Like maybe running is your thing, but maybe a different distance might be your thing. And having some of those things tested. If you get your genes tested, depending what company you use, you know, they can give you more insight as to that fast and slow twitch muscle fiber, and that might help direct you. Are you a power, or are you a sprinter, or are you an endurance? Really cool information, and with that information, you can extrapolate more information about methylation. Like, can you convert your vitamins into usable forms? Can you detox and whatnot? So those are some great physiological points for why you might be feeling a little bit more run down.
Okay, this is a great transition into the mental side of things. And if you're feeling that way, if you've been doing a lot of training, one of the things is like if your body's not reacting well to what you're doing, and you're definitely feeling burnt out, like we would call that like an overtraining state in
Okay.
most cases. So, or overtraining syndrome in the kind of like, if you're talking to coaches. And what's normal when you have overtraining syndrome is a loss of motivation. You could feel, you know, depressed, like a lack of motivation to continue what you've been doing. You also will have a complete inability to match your previous performance levels, and like you'll just find yourself either plateauing or decreasing in performance. You know, something's probably pretty wrong at that point, and you really do need to think about what's going on. And you know, obviously, it's something you talk about with your coach, with your medical practitioners, and try to figure out what's going on. One of the things I would say, generally speaking, in the endurance community, for those who are kind of new to it, I think that most people, if they do a one long run a week, they run it way too fast, and they're doing it in a way where it's not like the long run once a week is meant to be a recovery based run. It's supposed to be restorative to your nervous system.
Mm-hmm.
If you run that at higher than about a 60% max heart rate, you're probably not doing a restorative run. You're probably just tiring yourself out, so that your next quality session that you do is not going to be as good.
Okay.
So you have to know, like, your training is going to have like high intensity days, medium intensity days, low intensity days.
Mm-hmm.
The biggest mistake is when you are having your low intensity day, you're doing it at too high of an intensity, because
Okay.
people think they always want to work hard, right?
Yeah.
But that's not how endurance training works either, right? Like, you have to
Mm-hmm.
understand the purpose for each session. And if you're doing your long run too fast, you're probably just screwing up your other 2 or 3 sessions that are coming up during the week,
Okay.
rather than restoring and recovering yourself for those runs.
Yeah.
So
I
that's a
think
big mistake.
that might be a bit of a psychological game, though, right? It's where
Totally.
we always want to run a bit faster.
Right. And that's completely ridiculous. If you know anything about endurance training, you can't go out there and run every session hard. It's just not something that you can do. There's a researcher, Barry Fudge, who did his PhD on Kenyan running, and he went over to Kenya and spent a lot of time watching athletes train in the Rift Valley, you know, which is above 4,000 feet, where a lot of the great Kenyan athletes got their starts, and go back and continue to train throughout the year. And one of the things that he said that he could not believe was that on their easy days, these athletes that are like serious, like Olympic level athletes who can run really, really fast, like we're talking the low 2 hours in a marathon, they would run their recovery days at like 10-minute mile pace, right?
Wow.
That is so easy for them. It's like a crawl. Like almost anyone could run at that pace. And he
Yes.
could not believe, he's like, there's no way you run those sessions that slow. He went out
That's
and watched them, and they ran those sessions. that slow.
Yeah, for those
Your
of you,
recovery days have to be recovery.
yeah, if you do, if for those of you who don't know, that's almost like a walk pace.
Yeah,
Right? That's
it's shocking.
yeah. And for you,
Right.
it's shocking, especially for somebody at that level. You just assume that they're pushing it hard every time they're out there. So that's
No.
a good point too. That you're not sprinting every event. You've got those intervals. You've got times when you're supposed to be slow, and it, like you said, it's a recovery run, not a race.
Right. Not every run is meant to, like, you know, improve your top end. There's different reasons for every session. You have to understand the reasons that you're doing each session, and I think that's another good reason to get yourself a decent coach.
Yeah.
One other thing I wanted to touch on when we
Sure.
get to this mental, when we're talking about this mental approach to training, is the concept of heart rate variability,
Okay.
or HRV. Um, I think it's become a lot more common, this idea of heart rate variability and tracking it. It's
Mm-hmm.
so easy to track. All you need is like a smartphone and an app these days,
Yeah.
and possibly a little like chest strap, right? It's
Yeah.
very inexpensive to track your heart rate variability.
Mm-hmm.
Just a brief explanation of what this means is like, okay, so what it's doing is it's kind of tracking your, not just your heart rate, but the rest intervals between each beat. So if your heart, or if your nervous system or your body is stressed,
Mm-hmm.
like in a state of tiredness, your heart will beat faster generally at a higher rate, and the
Okay.
intervals between each beat will be much more steady. So it'll
Okay.
be like, right? If your heart's relaxed and you're in a good state, like you're in a relaxed state, you're ready to train hard, your heart will beat at a lower rate, and there will be greater variation between each beat. So what these apps do is they measure the variability between heart beats, right? To give
Okay.
you a readiness status. So what you do is you take a baseline for maybe a week. It takes 1 minute every day. You do it in the morning when you wake up. You could do it lying down. You can do it seated. You just have to do it the same every day. So you
Yes.
get a baseline for maybe 7 days. Then what happens is, after, the day after your session, your training session, you get up the next morning, it's going to tell you whether, hey, you can train hard today. It'll be like red, you should complete rest. Yellow, you trained hard. So you're kind of like, you're a little bit over stressed, but
Mm-hmm.
it's just like another tool to tell you whether your training is going the way you want it to go. Like, so for example, if you had a long, slow run, like a Sunday run, which a lot of people do, and it's supposed to be long and slow, right? And then you take your heart rate, you do your HRV the next morning, and it comes back red.
Yes.
You ran the run too fast, right?
Okay. Yeah.
So it's another tool that allows you to just really get an idea, like get a deeper understanding of your nervous system and how it functions.
Okay.
Most people have a very poor understanding of the two basic branches of the nervous system, right? You have your fight or flight, right? So
Yes.
let's say the fight or flight side of your nervous system is the thing that saves you when you see a bear in the woods, right? Or
Mm-hmm.
whatever. It allows you to like instantly run really fast, or like it'll dump adrenaline into your system in order to get you out of trouble, right?
Okay.
That's kind of the one branch of the nervous system. And I think most people, generally speaking, um, are way too high. Like their fight or flight is overstimulated. We have
Yes.
smartphones. We're constantly being stimulated and bombarded. We have traffic. People who live in cities, it's very stressful. You don't realize the baseline stress you're living in because you're doing it every day.
Yes.
But it's very stressful to live in cities. And there's all these things that are coming in, and you've got to really start thinking about managing distraction and managing the stimulation that you're taking in if you're trying to train as well, right? Like
Yeah.
your nervous system is like a cup, right? It's like a cup. You
Yeah.
fill it up to the top, and once it gets to the top, it just starts spilling out after that. Like your body will shut down. You can't overstuff your body with work or
Yes.
stimulation. It'll
Yeah.
just stop responding, and that's a self-preservation mechanism, right?
Mm-hmm.
But I think even less understood is the rest and digest side of things. So that's like let's say, for example, you go and you get a massage.
Mm-hmm.
And as soon as you finish the massage, you're like, oh man, I have to go to the bathroom and I wouldn't mind taking a nap, right? That's your rest and digest system, right?
Okay.
That system is, in most people, they don't have a good understanding of how to do restorative things in order to prepare themselves to work hard again.
Okay.
So it's like managing the, fight or flight and the rest and digest sides of your nervous system.
Yes.
That's what lets you train really hard and then recover really hard. Like if you can do those things and like, I mean, if you look at the very highest levels of athletics, athletes there totally get this stuff.
Yeah.
And like, if you would have went out to that session in Kenya and you saw all these Olympians running at 10-minute mile pace and you had no context, you'd be like, these guys are lazy. But they're not. They just understand their nervous systems and they know what they need to do in order to be ready to run hard again, in the next session.
Yeah, I like that. Run hard and rest hard, right? Like, yeah, that's something that we tend to forget about that phase. We don't have time, but I think we have to make time, or like you said, your body's just going to shut down. You're not going to have those energy reserves left anymore, and something's got to give. So
yeah, I think it's like sometimes complete rest. Like as a runner, I know people want to run 5-6 days a week because that's what pros do, right? But you're not a pro, number one. You don't have the capacity to train that a pro has because you probably have a lot of other things going on during your day.
yeah.
So what you want to think about is like, it's kind of a concept that Tim Ferriss popularized a few years ago in his book, The 4-Hour Body, is the minimum effective dose. What is the least I can do that will get me the results that I want? Not how do I do more? It's like, what is the least I can do to get me the results I want?
Yeah.
How do I work this training in so that my training is really, really smart, not really, really hard?
Yeah, I think that's key when somebody's feeling stressed and tired and burnt out, right? Like you don't
Oh,
want to be
absolutely.
adding more to that plate that's already full. So if you can tweak those training sessions so that they're more effective, and maybe you've got a little bit more of that rest built in there, then yeah, that minimum effective dose. I love that. Great tip.
I think it's an idea that in the endurance running community is it's really yet to take hold, but especially for those who are who running is a lifestyle and it's a big part of their life.
Yeah.
Mindful running is important, right? And everything you do should be mindful. Every session should have a purpose. You should have if you're going to spend 5 days a week, an hour a day, or 2 hours a day doing this, or even 3 days a week, 2 hours a day doing this, you deserve the best possible instruction that you can find. Now, I'm not a distance coach. I'm not an endurance coach. I'm not trying to sell coaching services here, but invest in yourself, I think, is really important. Invest in the best people you can around you, be that your medical practitioner, be that your massage therapist, be that the coach that's guiding your training. Like, don't settle for second best. It just ends up costing you a ton of time. Is it going to cost you money? Yeah, but money is a tool. Money is a tool to get you, where you want to go. And, that's up to every individual person, what they can afford to invest. But it's something that I think people don't do enough, is they don't invest enough money in order to shortcut and get themselves the good results that they deserve.
Yeah. Okay. Well, Tyrone, this has been fantastic. I feel like I could pick your brain for hours. You are just this wealth of knowledge, and I really appreciate you coming on here and sharing that with all these people. Just to recap some of the things that you touched on today. Are you in the right event and knowing when enough is enough? If you're not sure, get those tests done at a minimum of once a year, and make sure that vitamin D and iron or ferritin is on those tests, especially if you're somebody who is tired, because iron, the biggest symptom is fatigue. The vitamin D, the symptom is fatigue. And you also mentioned that connection with shin splints. If you feel like those shins are burning up, that might be something we need to get tested, and possibly the genes or something that we could look into as well. Varying that surface, get off of the sidewalk. That was a great tip there. Let's see, are you suffering from overtraining syndrome? So reassessing what's going on in the rest of your life, because like you said, we're not Like, this is not our job. We are not athletes that are getting paid. We have jobs, we have families, and we have everything else on top of our goals that we want to stay fit. So are you suffering from the overtraining? We need to reassess, monitor those stress levels with either the heart rate variability, just rechecking in on our own personal stress, what's going on in there, focusing on more on that rest and digest stage, because we tend to be in that fight or flight mode all the time. So balancing that off, having some mindful running, and that minimum effective dose. That was a great phrase, the minimum effective dose. And then finally, invest in yourself. What other investment could be more important, right? If you want that energy back, you're gonna have to put the work back into yourself. So I appreciate your time, Tyrone. So again, there's some links to Tyrone's The World Speed Summit if you guys want some more information on Tyrone and his website and whatnot. And yeah, okay.
Thank you, Dr. Jennifer.
Thank you, Tyrone. We'll be in touch.